So, guys, you might have heard that Larry Elder was on The Breakfast Club, the pretty far left group of Black people featuring Charlemagne. And they have invited Larry Elder, a man who's running for president, who I hope that everybody donates $1 to get him on the debate stage, because I believe that his voice is worthy of being heard by the masses. He's the man who originally red-pilled Dave Rubin. He slaughtered him with facts and figures over racist so-called police that Dave proposed years and years ago. And Larry Elder in general is very pleasant to listen to because he makes sense, if for no other reason. And he has tremendous command over language and facts. And I have not seen but maybe a couple of minutes of this hour-long clip, and I'm going to probably be dividing it up for you guys into various segments. But I'm gonna be watching this, but I'm gonna be watching the entire clip with the Breakfast Club and then analyzing it with you guys. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section. If you think that I analyzed something wrong, if you have your own thoughts on a specific subject, I definitely want to hear from you. So here we go.
Presidential candidate Larry Elder, welcome, brother. So let's jump right into it. Why are you running for president?
Well, I'm running as an America First mega guy, and we have an America First mega guy running, obviously. So the question is, what do you bring to the table?
You say MAGA?
MAGA.
Okay.
And the answer is, I bring a lot of issues to the table that I feel our side is not talking enough about, if at all. For example, the number one social problem in America, by far, is the epidemic not of COVID, but of fatherlessness. 70% of Black kids today enter the world without a father in the home, married to the mother, up from 25% back in 1965. Now 25% of white kids enter the world today without a father in the home, married to the mother. And the stats are clear. Even Barack Obama once cited them. If you're raised without a dad, you're 5 times more likely to be poor and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail. What's happened? In the mid-'60s, with I think the best of intentions, a Democrat named Lyndon Johnson launched what he called the War on Poverty. And since then, we have incentivized women to marry the government and incentivized men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility.
As a father, I'm going to tell you absolutely that it is an immoral responsibility and imperative to stay with my children. I completely agree with everything that Larry said here. It is an epidemic in not only the Black community, but in America, in the Hispanic community, in the Black community, in the white community. The only one that is not is the Chinese community, the Asian community, rather. And look at how they are prospering versus the rest of the nation being the highest earners. I believe that in the past, it used to be very common to have a Japanese gardener. That is no longer the case. And that is because they value family and education.
You know, when I say this to people, the pushback I get is, well, there are lots of things that are going on, systemic racism, poverty. Here's the problem. If you look at a young Black male aged 10 to 43, that's young to me because I'm 71 years old. A young Black man in that demo is 13 times more likely to be murdered than a young white man, same demo. Young Black man, real.
That is an absolutely tragic statistic. And I do believe that Larry's absolutely right, that fatherhood and dads staying with their children would help alleviate that to a large degree.
Young, 19 and under, the number one cause of preventable death is homicide, almost always at the hands of another young Black male. Same demo for whites, the number one cause of preventable death is unintentional deaths. That includes drug overdoses, automobile accidents, drownings. It's not until they get to number 4 that death is the cause. In America, 60% of the shootings, the robberies, and the homicides are committed by Black people, often against other Black people. Of the homicides in this country, half of them are Black victims, almost all killed by other Blacks. How do you explain that if it isn't for the absence of fathers? Are you prepared to say Black people are just genetically inclined to commit more crime? I doubt it. And the go-to reaction often is poverty and systemic racism. Here's the problem. 1940, when there was blatant racism. This is before Brown versus Board of Education, before the Civil Rights Act of 64. KKK was still alive and well. 87% of Blacks lived under the poverty line. Now it's about 14%. You can't blame it on poverty. You can't blame it on racism. It is the breakdown of the nuclear intact family, and neither side is talking about it. The left doesn't talk about it because they caused it with the welfare state, and our side does not talk about it because if you're white, you'll be accused of dissing single moms who are heroically raising these kids, or you'll be accused of being a racist, or if you're black, you'll be accused, as I was.
I was absolutely accused of this when I commented on what happens in the Black community, and users on Facebook, and this was before 2020, commented that I need to mind my own business and that what happens in those communities is up to them and I have no right to speak. But that is woke thinking and ideology for you in practice.
By the LA Times being the black face of white supremacy. Nobody's talking about that. I am.
What are the reasons, if your statistics are right, what are the reasons that you think fathers aren't in the home?
As I said, it's because in the mid-'60s, Lyndon Johnson launched what he called the War on Poverty. And Charlemagne, literally, they sent social workers door to door in the inner city. I remember this, advising women of the availability of welfare provided there was no man in the house. It created an economic incentive for women to marry the government. Same thing with whites.
And don't you think that that is absolutely an evil thing to do? We will pay you to keep the man out of the house. In other words, they are bribing you to have your children raised in a single parent household that obviously yields subpar results compared to a two-parent family. Another thing, by the way, that I was called racist for having stated by several different people. It just amazes me what these people deem racist. It's just a way to shut down the conversation. But the incentives that the government offered to single women in the Black community just destroyed those communities. If you take a look at the crime statistics in Black America in 1930, they pale in comparison to today. And again, I believe that Larry is correct in blaming this on single parent families, which is a tragedy.
In 1965, 8% of whites entered the world without a father in the home married to the mother. Now it's about 25%, also up threefold. Look at census data, 1910, 1920, 1930, in places like Milwaukee, Chicago, Philadelphia, a young Black kid was slightly more likely to be brought into a world with a father in the home married to the mother than a young white kid. We have incentivized this kind of bad behavior, and it's had a disproportionately bad effect on the Black community.
Let me ask you a question. What do white people do wrong?
What?
What do you mean, what do white?
What is that really what he takes out of that? Is this really the question that Charlemagne asks after this whole thing? What do white people do wrong? I'm shocked. So had to jump in with my shockness.
People do. I'm not worried about white people. I'm worried about what's going on with us.
But if there's systemic racism in this country, which we know it is.
No, I don't say there is. You say there is. I don't believe that.
Oh, you don't believe there's
No, there
systemic
used to
racism?
be, obviously. Tell me what you think the number one systemic example of systemic racism is in America.
Oh man, there's so many.
Just give me the most
There's so
important one.
many.
you think.
Really?
At the top of mind, I'd probably say mass incarceration.
Really? During the Great Depression, when 50% of Black adults were unemployed, you didn't have this kind of mass incarceration. It's the breakdown of the family. There's a direct.
I'm not going to. I agree with the family part. I'm a Black man who is a father to his children, and I'm
Right.
a happily married
Right.
Black man to a Black woman. So I'm never going to argue with that part, But I just feel like everything is black with you. Black is wrong. Black people do this and Black people do that. And when I asked you what white people do wrong, you said you're not worried about white people at all.
I'm talking about the damage, disproportionate damage.
But again, he is concentrating on what is the problem, what is the solution? And he outlines a very simple solution, which is family. For me, it's also family and education, which gives you the tools to succeed in the world. And I don't believe that you necessarily have to go to college to get it. But again, Charlemagne is trying to shift the focus to what is wrong with white people. And I just don't understand the logic of it. It seems like a debate tactic that would work on people that automatically try to defend themselves rather than continue to press the point.
What's going on in the Black community. For example, look at these smash and grabs that are taking place in Los Angeles, where I live. There's a suburb called Glendale, where at a mall recently, a mob of 30 to 40 people, they had masks on, but one guy got popped. He was Black, and I think most of those who were doing this were Black. And in recent years and times, there have been a number of these in places like Chicago, places like New York. If I were involved in something like that, Charlemagne, I grew up with a dad, just as you're raising your own children. I would have been more afraid of my father than I would about the cops catching me. These kids are afraid of neither. They don't have a father in the home. Cops are demoralized. They're pulling back. Their manpower is short. And as a result, You tell a bad guy you're less likely to be caught, convicted, incarcerated, crime goes up. They may be criminals, but they're not stupid.
Mm-hmm.
When you say, what do white people do? I mean, this is a country that has struggled mightily to get over its historic racism. There was a civil war. There was a big civil rights movement. This is the only majority white country that's ever elected a black president, let alone reelected a black president. The three biggest cities in America are New York, Chicago, LA. They all have black mayors, even though no city has a majority of black population. The president of Harvard is a black female. Martin Luther King in 1966, Charlemagne, gave an interview to the BBC. This is 2 years after the Civil Rights Act of '64 got passed. And he said, I'm amazed at how many positive changes there have been in America in the last 2 years. Why, if things keep going like this, we could have a black president in about 40 years' time.
Mm-hmm.
Do the math. Right on cue, Barack Obama elected 2008. He didn't say there'll be a black female president of Harvard, and there has been. He didn't say there are going to be black CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, and there have been several. He didn't say the percentage of the House would equal the percentage of black people in the population, and it does. He didn't say the three largest cities would have black mayors, and they do. He didn't say the largest and most prestigious organization of doctors, the American Medical Association, would have 2 black presidents, and there have been. He didn't say the most prestigious organization of lawyers, the American Bar Association, would have 2 black presidents, and they have. He said president, meaning at that point, I can feel that I've reached the mountaintop, which is the speech he gave right before he got assassinated the day before. And now we act as if Barack Obama never even got elected. And we're still talking about systemic racism. It's not.
This is the point that I just can't comprehend. Everything is systemic racism today in America. Yeah, against Asian people trying to get into school where if you're black, you get preferential treatment. That is actual systemic racism. If there is systemic racism today, sorry to say it, it goes in favor of black people, where Joe Biden appoints a black female to the Supreme Court and specifically states that he's choosing along racial lines.
I've made no decision except one. The person I will nominate will be someone with extraordinary qualifications, character, experience, and integrity. And that person will be the first black woman ever nominated to the United States Supreme Court.
That is racism in and of itself. Imagine me stating that I'm going to hire somebody because they are white. Everybody would rightfully accuse me of racism. But when you're black, you get in line for COVID reparations, for a restaurant, for farmers. And they tried to give it out to the black people first. The same when they thought that, or maybe they didn't think, maybe this was an actual racist thing, when the governor of Vermont decided that you would be given your COVID vaccine first if you were black. That is actual systemic racism that is existing today in favor of black people. So when Charlemagne says that systemic racism exists, that is what I would point out. It would make me vastly unpopular with watchers of his show. But I will speak them because it's true. Leave your thoughts in the comments section. And by the way, Larry Elder does a fabulous job with outlining all of the progress that we have made and all of the black people that have been elected into important positions, including President of the United States, but we're still systemically racist.
Fair, it's wrong. And you're discouraging black people from working hard. 1996.
Okay. Mr. Elder, a quick question. Let's just remove the word racism, since that seems to be a word that triggers, a conversation down the water hole. Let's just focus on the word system.
Okay, I am not a fan of this woman. I saw her interview Vivek Ramaswamy in a very combative manner. I imagine that she's going to be doing the same thing to Larry, the way that she starts off. But let's see. Let me not prejudge. Let me not be prejudiced. But I do have a basis to judge her because I've seen her prior behavior.
Okay.
You mentioned that the system was the one that discouraged. And again, we have no problem with agreeing that the family, the black family, should certainly has some room for some improvement. But let's just focus on system.
Room for improvement?
System. Well, we're not going to go down that water. We're not going to go down that water hole. Let's get to the question. So the question is, you said that the system encouraged black women to be single mothers, correct?
I said the welfare state, yes.
The welfare, the system. So who's in charge of the system? Who was in charge of the system?
Well, it was Democrats that passed it.
And who were Democrats? Were they black or white at that time?
Well, at the time, majority of black people were Democrats, as the majority of black people are Democrats now.
Not the voters. I'm talking about the system. Remember, the main idea is the word system. Who was in charge of the system at the time? The Democrats at the time, the system. I'm just going to Charlemagne's point about white or black. Was it white Democrats in charge of the system or black Democrats in charge of the system?
Well, if you're prepared to say that Lyndon Johnson did this viciously with an intent to destroy the black family, I disagree. He did it with the best of intentions. And if you look at the New York Times, which is left wing, the Washington Post, which is left wing, they cheered all of this.
Right. And what I'm asking was it white people? So I'm going to ask again in case my mic's not coming through clearly. Was it white people in charge of the system or black people in charge of that system that helped break down the black family? It's a simple yes, just a simple question. Why?
No, it's not really a simple question. All you're doing is framing it in such a way that you want him to answer white so you can satiate the racial appetite for your black listening base or yourself or your own predilections towards hatred of white, anti-whiteness.
White or black?
Well, you didn't have to go on welfare unless you voluntarily chose to go on welfare. The inducement was put there by Democrats, by the left.
Correct. Okay.
White
most black people were Democrats, and they voted for these white people.
Not
too.
Voters. I said who's in charge of the system.
Well, who put them in charge?
Was Lyndon Johnson white or black?
Who put them in charge? Fine. Lyndon Johnson was white.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I made my point. Thank you. I made my point. You see, you don't have to say nothing, Larry Elder, because I made my point. I got you to say that Lyndon Johnson was white. Oh, my God. What a point of admission.
Argument is that the reason he did it is because of racism. Then I disagree. He did it because of
That's not my argument. I just asked you a simple question. Was he white or black? Charlemagne?
What difference does that make?
You said you talked about the smash and grabs, right? And I find that interesting because when you see the mass shootings that happen, majority of those people are white males. What do you think about that?
Actually, if you look at the percentage of whites in America, which is 60%, percentage of mass shooters is under that. The percentage of people that commit hate crime is under that. The percentage of people who are serial killers is under that. Black people are 13% of the population. We commit a greater percentage compared to that of mass shootings.
We talked about the smash and grabs, though. So I was saying.
And by the way, another thing that I was called a white nationalist for was because in a conversation, I brought up the FBI statistic that blacks represent 13% of the population and commit 52% of the murders. That in the woke orthodoxy, to bring up a statistic makes you a white supremacist. And again, they are just going and attacking white people. Larry Elder is talking about problems, solutions, reasons behind the problems, and they continue to go and say that the white person is the devil and the fault of all of our problems. And this is what is proselytized on the left-hand side of the aisle that they are repeating to the listeners of their show. It's all the white man's fault. Not what can we do in today's America to change our situation, but blame the white man, and we are oppressed. Come here for your daily oppression.
You're using that as an example. I'm saying, well, what about, the mass shooters that are usually white males?
One more time. They are usually white males because 60% of the country is white. However, they underrepresent in terms of the number of mass shootings. About 50% or so of the mass shootings in this country are committed by white people, even though white people are 60% of the population. They underrepresent. We overrepresent when it comes to hate crime, when it comes to mass shootings, when it comes to serial killings, when it comes to robberies, when it comes to virtually every category of violent crime. We overrepresent.
So what do white people do wrong?
Oh my God, did he really just ask that question again? Didn't he just, do they continue to go here? I already explained it to you guys. I'm going to try to calm down right now, but it is so clear that there is an anti-whiteness to this show. Imagine if I was asking, well, what do black people do wrong? Hey, Vernon, what do black people do wrong? Well, these are the things that white people can do better. Hey, Vernon, what do black people do wrong?
It seems to me rather than deal with what's going on, the pathology that's going on in the inner city, you want me to talk about how bad white people are, which I don't think is a particularly productive thing to do.
Well, I think there's a cause and effect, but if we can't talk about the cause, which I believe is systemic racism and white supremacy, the FBI said.
Well, I just told you, if it's systemic racism, please explain to me how it was when America really had systemic racism in 1940. 87% of blacks lived under the poverty line. Again, this is during Jim Crow era. My father is from Athens, Georgia, grew up in Jim Crow. My mom is from Huntsville, Alabama, grew up in Jim Crow. 87% of blacks live below the poverty line. This is before Brown versus Board of Education.
Probably
You
because we
did
had no
not
choice.
find these kind of black on black crime.
Probably because we had no
But they
choice
still
to
were
do it
living
ourselves.
below the poverty line, though, sir.
I'm sorry?
You're forgetting the fact that they were still living below the poverty line. You're
And that is exactly, she's trying to make this point, and she's probably going to completely negate it, is the fact that they were living below the poverty line. But she's just emphasizing Larry Elder's point that there wasn't as much crime. And why was that? Because there were two parents in the family, because there was a father in the picture. So this dumbass is just going to continue to look stupid, is my prediction. Wait and see.
picking and choosing, saying this was good, but this was bad.
Okay.
The bottom line, they end between the poverty line. But let's move forward
Well,
on
let me,
system.
can I just,
Let's move
can I
forward.
just address that? In 1940, 87% of blacks lived under the poverty line. 1960, that number had fallen to 47%. That's a 40-point drop in 20 years. That's the greatest 20-year period of economic expansion for black people in the history of America. Again, well before Brown versus Board of Education, well before the KKK imploded, well before we had race-based preferences. Why? Because it was rare for a black kid to be raised in a family without a father in the home. A strong belief in Judeo-Christian values, a belief in patriotism, even as America wasn't applying these values to black people, obviously, and a belief in entrepreneurship. All those things are now under assault by organizations like Black Lives Matter. Charlemagne, Black Lives Matter had on their website an attack on the nuclear family. The founders are self-described Marxists, trained Marxists. Marx wanted to dethrone God, was an atheist, and Marx did not believe in capitalism, let alone entrepreneurship. All the things that made black people still survive in virulent racism are now under attack by organizations like Black Lives
But
Matter.
all of those things have always been under attack by white supremacy. You can go back to things like whether it's the Tulsa race massacres, like every time black people do create these systems that are our systems and we are the entrepreneurs, it seems like white supremacy finds a way to destroy it.
Every time, look, the Tulsa massacre, within about 5 years, that whole area was rebuilt. It was not even called the Black Wall Street until after it was rebuilt. And it was rebuilt, by the way, by black people without one dime of government money.
Yeah, but who destroyed it to begin with?
It was racists who destroyed it. No question
okay,
about it.
just making
We've
sure.
had race riots, but so have Japanese. Hold on.
Are they going to go back and prosecute every time that there was a racial moment in our society that was on the negative side? You can find them in every single society. You can find them. I have lived in 7 different countries and I've traveled to 60, and there is racism in the rest of the world. And in America, it is far less, considering the fact that we are a multicultural boiling pot. We have done an amazing job in alleviating the racism in America, and I wish that the rest of people would travel the rest of the world and see how even in Southeast Asia, Thai people are racist against those in their neighboring country of Myanmar, even though they look almost identical and are very hard. Same with Cambodia. Racism exists. You want to see racism? Go to China and find out how black people are treated there. Or in Russia. And I lived in Eastern Europe for a period of time. I lived in the Czech Republic. I've been to Russia. There is massive amounts of racism that exists there. It's just that they don't have to deal with it very often. Not like in America, where you have this multiracial boiling pot and you have these tribalists like the Breakfast Club that are continuing to help divide us.
You do agree that there's racism. I'm just so confused. Mr. Elder,
I never even came close to saying. I never came close to saying there was no racism.
You just said you don't think it's systemic racism.
Not anymore. Obviously, there was. We had something called slavery. We had something called Jim Crow.
That destroyed black. Hold on, sir. That was system that destroyed. That was the system that destroyed Black Wall Street. It's the same system right now that's not even wanting to pay those same living descendants, because I know your position on reparations, but those same living descendants of Black Wall Street.
Okay.
And then you move, and then you go on to say that the system, the quote unquote system, is also trying to destroy President Trump. So I'm just so confused on: do you believe that the system can destroy or not? You pick and choose, sir. And
if you want to know the signs that you're talking to a stupid person, they keep using the same word over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. System, the system, the system.
That's what's so confusing to me. You just said it wasn't racism. Now it is racism. When it was time to build it back, there was no racism.
I said it wasn't systemic racism. Let's talk about.
So what are you just hung up on the word system?
Can I just make this point, Charlemagne, please? Let's take Chinese Americans. Chinese Americans were the first ethnic group to be excluded with an immigration act in the late 1800s. They had riots against Chinese in LA, in San Francisco. There were laws that prevented Chinese Americans from participating in the laundry business. I'm in California. California, of course, rounded up Japanese Americans during World War II. There were laws that prevented Japanese Americans from owning farmland. The average Japanese American household has a higher per capita income than the average white household. The average Chinese American household has a higher per capita income than the average white household. How does that happen? It happens because of a strong belief in family. It is rare for a Chinese American.
As I stated earlier in this conversation with you guys, that is exactly why it is the case. I guess that Larry Elder and I see pretty much eye to eye on that.
Or a Japanese American kid to have a child outside of wedlock, and a strong belief in education and a strong belief in entrepreneurship. These are the kinds of qualities that make people successful.
You can't blame everything on having a fatherless family, right? Because
I didn't say blaming everything.
I know, but that's what you're saying. You're saying a strong community. But
no, you said that's what I just said. I didn't say that.
You talk about the Asian community. Asian community, it's easy for them to get loans for entrepreneurships. It's easy for them to get loans for houses.
That's because you have a better credit rating. Do you think that it was easy in 1900 for an Asian to get a loan? No, but today, if you have a strong financial report, a credit report that goes to your lender, it's going to be easier for anybody to get that loan.
You look at our community.
Okay.
If you really want to talk about our community, right? You look at the schools in our community. Some of our schools are the worst, right? Would you agree with that? Yes or no?
Absolutely. Which
Right?
is why
Don't have Wi-Fi, don't have education,
which is
don't
why
have
one of
books.
the reasons I'm running for president is for school choice.
Also, would you say that it's in our
That's
community
also
is
systemic. by the way.
it's also in our community is heavy food deserts. There's nothing but fast food places that are just killing and destroying that. Would you say that's true?
Systemic too. by the way.
Boy,
Is that systemic? I mean, would you as a business go into an area that has systemically, if you want to use the word systemically, looted and destroyed small businesses? Why do you think that Whole Foods moved out of San Francisco? Because they were being destroyed. What happens with Black Lives Matter going and destroying the local markets? These people pack up shop and go because it's not worth the risk in order to earn what little profit there is, especially with Democrats and all of their laws and rules and regulations that makes it virtually impossible to run a business in a blue city. Why do you think that you have a food desert with really high prices? It's because of the lack of competition from big chains that are just going to be shoplifted, and you have the local bodega that's going to be charging higher prices to make up for the risk.
Would you say that's true? I'm just asking a question.
You said a number of things. I just addressed one of them about
Sure.
loans. In 1965, Barack Obama, who was in private practice, joined a bunch of other lawyers to file a class action lawsuit against Citicorp, which is headquartered here in New York. 186 Black people were applying for loans for mortgages and didn't get them. And they accused Citicorp of engaging in racism. Citicorp said, no, it's not racism. You have poor credit scores, and we want to make sure we get our money back. Obama joined a bunch of other lawyers, and they sued Citicorp in a class action lawsuit. And Citicorp said, okay, to hell with it. Gave them all loans. And they followed them all up. Daily Caller did a few years later. Almost all of them lost their homes. Several of them filed for bankruptcy. One of them even said, when you don't qualify for a loan, maybe we shouldn't get a loan. Well, duh. It wasn't true that Black people were not getting loans. Plus, there are all sorts of Black-owned community banks around the country, and it turns out the turn-down rate when you apply for a loan at a community bank was even higher because they had less capital and they couldn't afford to loan money to risky people. It is just not the case.
By the way, this is how the government interferes in private business, and they wield the club and basically force the bank to give it a loan to people that aren't worth the credit risk. And what do you think happens? These loans, as they stated, they are not made good on. And the bank has to repossess the house and lose all that money. That's not good for society. That's not good for anybody. It's not even good for the people that got saddled with the loans that they could not pay back. And by the way, Larry Elder is stating what I stated moments ago, just for the record.
That the reason for the plight of the Black community is because people were not lending money to them. It's just not true.
That's not true. But
yeah, that's
hold
not
on
true.
one second, Charlemagne. But see,
What's not
you're
true?
bringing back facts of 1965, right? Let's talk 2023, right?
I said 1995.
1995. We'll talk 2023, right? My son will be successful in real estate and successful in buying a house. You know why? Because his father owns his house.
Because
his
of
father
you.
owns a house, right? But my father
Because of you and the drive. Because of you and the drive you put into
did
him.
not own houses.
Because of you and the drive you put into him.
We're not going to have a conversation.
You're not even appreciating what you've done to your son.
I'm just asking you a question. I just let you speak and I'll let you talk.
Okay.
Y'all can talk.
We have a conversation.
All right.
But when we talk about it, right, it's harder for our community to get loans, right? And not just because of poor credit scores. It's because of where the areas are. You talked about the Asian community. A lot of the Asian community have their own.
Because if you want to assign a credit score to the area, I can have the greatest credit score in the world and propose to open up a business of high-end watches in the south side of Chicago that's not going to have a good success rate. And of course, the banks are going to take a look at their theoretical, how likely I am going to be able to pay back the loan.
Banks, and they're able to process and get their own banks. There's not too many African American branches that are able to give out money. So that's one. Then let's talk about getting grants for schools. They're not even giving grants for schools at the rate that they're giving grants for white people. And let's talk about when they talk about entrepreneurship. They are giving so much money to these white and Asian kids and Asian people doing it, and a 1,000 times less than our community. Will you agree to any of that?
No, I don't. I don't agree with virtually any of what you just now said. The turn down rate for a white applicant for a mortgage is higher than the turn down rate for a Japanese or Chinese applicant for a mortgage. Now, are you telling me that banks are discriminating against white and in favor of Asian Americans? It's because their credit scores are better. They often live below their means. They save more, even when they're making the same amount of money than black people do. If you have poor credit score, you're not going to get a loan. Period. End of statement. Even the head of Urban League, a black man, once said that if you have poor credit score, you're not going to get a loan. End of statement.
Sir,
Yes.
let's just.
Sir.
When you were talking about crime, you weren't prepared to talk about disproportion. You talked about how it was more black people that was doing it, and then you talked about how we're the smaller, of the population. The same applies also to the loans. It's more white people than it is black people. You seem to pick and choose.
I'm talking about the rate. I'm talking about the
Right,
rate.
whatever it is. The bottom line is it's more white people than it is black people. And so if more black people are not getting loans disproportionately, it seems you'd only want to apply the disproportion to the conversation when it benefits your talking point.
It's all about the credit score is what he's stating. Whites get disproportionately turned down for loans versus Asians. This is an example of a stupid person. Look at that face. That is what you should associate with stupidity. Not because of her skin color, because of what she says.
I'm not sure you understood.
Which is why they say.
I'm not sure you understood. I'm not sure you understood my point. That's why I mentioned in 1995 when 186 black people who were not getting loans filed a class action lawsuit claiming that they were denied the loan because of racism. Citicorp said, okay, here are your loans. The reason I wasn't giving you the loans is because we're afraid you weren't going to be able to pay them back.
I'm not talking about
Fast forward,
sir.
they weren't able to pay them back, which proves the Citicorp point.
I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about
I know
that.
you're
I'm
not.
talking about your
Because
response.
inconvenient.
I'm talking about your response to Envy when you said more white people get approved for loans.
Since you
I'm
like
not talking
numbers,
about
Washington Post
said
said black Americans have the highest denial rates for purchase and refinancing loans, according to Home Mortgage Disclosures Act.
Because of their
in
credit
black,
score.
and all credit scores are the same. 15% of Hispanic loan applicants were denied, compared with about 11% of white and 10% of Asian applicants with same credit scores. And that's Washington Post, since you love numbers so much, and I know you do love numbers. That's coming from the Washington Post. That's 2023, not 1995.
I can show you a study that says the opposite.
Let me ask you a question,
Yeah.
Mr. Elder. Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, and I'm pretty sure everybody who just caught a RICO with him in Georgia, they all had fathers, and they still ended up in jail. How did that happen?
Mhm.
What?
Nobody
Well, let
said
me help.
nobody said if you have a father you won't go to jail. And nobody said if you didn't have a father you are going to jail. My father never.
But guess what you did say, Mr. Elder? I'm sorry, respectfully.
May I answer his question?
Guess what you did say.
May I
I'm
answer his
gonna help you
question?
'cause I know-
Let him finish his statement, Ted.
Okay.
My father never knew his biological father. He got thrown out of the house when he was 13 years old. 8th grade dropout, Jim Crow South, Athens, Georgia. Fast forward, my dad cleaned toilets, 2 full-time jobs cleaning toilets when I was growing up. Went to night school to get his GED, and then after that, he went to night school to learn how to operate a small restaurant. Age of 47, my dad saved his nickels and dimes from his job, starts a small restaurant near downtown LA. Fast forward, he retires in his 80s. He owned that restaurant. He owned property next door, plus the house that's still in our family. Not too shabby for somebody who did not know his biological father. It's not a death sentence. You still have choices. It's just much, much more difficult to raise a child on your own. Even Tupac Shakur said, I know for a fact. Tupac, excuse me. I know for a fact, had I had a father, I would have been more confident. I would have been more disciplined. End of quote.
Well, how did all those white men end up in jail when they still had fathers? The Trumps and the Giuliani. I'm just asking the question. How did they end?
Did Trump end up in jail? Is that really what you're stating? This is what is this done in the future? You know this for a fact that Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump, this is the framing of the question? Good God, there are at least 2 stupid people on this show. Or they're from the future and they know much more than we do.
Up in jail?
Because some people commit crimes.
No, sir. Stop.
No, sir.
Apologies for
People
interrupting.
do not end up in jail because they commit crimes. They end up in jail because of the white racism that keeps our people down.
you earlier. I just couldn't stomach the answer that I knew you were going to say.
Couldn't stomach the answer?
Yeah, I couldn't stomach, because your actual answer to Trump being what was happening to him with the indictments, you actually said that the system was doing it. You said there was a two-tier system. This is your words.
That's right.
It was a two-tier system. So when it came to Trump, all of a sudden
there she goes with her system word again. How many times more is she going to repeat it here? I bet you at least a couple.
I believe in this systematic thing that's happening to Trump. But then when it happens to black people,
but it's not about race. It's not about race.
I didn't ask you that. I asked you. Remember, I made it easy for you, and I took race out of it. Remember
when I made it easy for you and asked you what 2 + 2 was, and you still told me 5 because you infected by that woke ass mind virus?
I said I'm just talking about the system. I'm just talking about the system.
If you want to ask me whether I believe Donald Trump is being treated the same way as Joe Biden and is being treated the same way as Hillary Clinton, all of these people are white. All these people are white. There's a double standard.
Well,
Mr. Elder, you didn't hear my question.
You said that
you didn't hear my question.
You didn't hear my question.
People commit crimes, so you do believe that Trump, Giuliani, they committed a crime?
I don't know.
But you just said some people commit crimes.
I said some people committed a crime. I didn't say Donald Trump committed a crime.
I do believe that some people commit crimes, but 2 people that have not been finished prosecuting, I'm not going to say that they necessarily committed a crime. Oh, are these people that dumb that they believe that the crime has already been committed? It hasn't been prosecuted. They haven't been found guilty. Thus, they aren't in jail. Thus, the framing of the question, how do Trump and Rudy Giuliani end up in jail? Well, so they haven't ended up in jail. Ignorant ass.
If you ask me specifically whether I believe Donald Trump committed a crime,
I
don't.
Specifically about those people and why they ended up in jail. And they all got fathers.
Well, Donald Trump is not in jail.
Oh, you got indicted.
Yeah, you got indicted. That's a far cry from being in jail.
They're so stupid.
And why did he get indicted?
Well, he got arrested, is what I'm saying. He's going to get arrested.
He's been arrested. He got indicted, in my opinion, because
You know what? For somebody that professes to know exactly what goes on in the Black community, I believe that you likely had friends growing up that went to jail. And that's very different than being arrested or indicted. The stupidity of these people is off the charts. Chill down, Richie B. Chill down.
DOJ has a double standard. They let Hillary pass, for example. She clearly violated the Espionage Act by having an unsecured server in her basement. She paid for the Steele dossier. She destroyed 30,000 emails that were under subpoena, and she got a wrist slap. And Donald Trump is now being indicted, I think, for the 4th time. It's unfair.
Right.
Black people been telling y'all how corrupt the FBI is for a long time.
And the FBI has been corrupt. There was COINTEL, the FBI. J. Edgar Hoover also wiretapped MLK under Robert Kennedy, a Democrat Attorney General, Malcolm X, lots of things. Right. And I find it interesting how the same people who criticize the FBI historically are now defending the FBI because they're going after Donald Trump.
Oh, we're not defending the FBI.
I didn't say you were. I said some of the same people.
We're just looking and saying, damn, finally.
What's your thoughts with Florida? And you see that they're trying to take our history out of these history books and not trying to teach our history. What's your thoughts?
I find it interesting that the Democrats are the ones complaining about Florida. This is a party of slavery, party of Jim Crow, the party of the KKK, the party of the Southern Manifesto, the party of Dred Scott, the party that I said earlier destroyed the nuclear intact family, and the party that is opposing school choice. And now they want to lecture Florida on making sure the proper history of slavery is taught. I don't know anybody who's defending slavery. Anybody. Not Ron DeSantis. He's not defending.
People benefited from slavery.
Actually, you're talking about one line. You're talking about one line in about 127 pages of the study. And it is a line that was repeated almost verbatim in the associated, in the advanced placement African American course that the DeSantis administration refused to use because of all of the sexual stuff that was in it. It's basically the same thing that was in the advanced placement African American courses. And now because it's in that, all of a sudden the governor is accused of somehow defending slavery. He's not doing anything of the sort.
What did you think about that?
Well, sir, you were actually one that defended slavery. In your comments, you said that, like it or not, slavery was legal in response to reparations. So it's you that was defending slavery, correct?
Defending it and saying that it's illegal are two very different things. Slavery, unfortunately.
That was your response. That was your response into if reparations should happen. So your response was like it or not.
Defense, but it is it's been part and parcel of human in the beginning. Asians enslaved Asian whites, Blacks enslaved blacks, Native Americans enslaved Native Americans. This is a culture, the Western civilization, that had a revulsion against it. We had a civil war against it. And we ought to applaud ourselves for doing something about this. This is a flawed country. It's moving forward. It's becoming more perfect all the time. Today, if you are born and raised in America, if you finish high school, presumably one where you can read, write, and compute at grade level, which is why I support school choice, don't have a kid before you're 20, get married first, get a job, keep a job, don't quit it until you get another job, and avoid the criminal justice system, you will not be poor. And if you don't follow that formula, there's a good chance you will be.
The first GOP debate is coming up, and you didn't qualify, and I saw you write.
Well, you didn't say. I've not yet qualified. It's not until August 21.
Oh, okay. Well, I saw you write in the op-ed that the Republican National Committee has rigged the rules of the game by instituting a set of criteria that is so onerous. What is it? Onerous. Onerous and poorly
I
designed.
mispronounced Tupac, so you mispronounced onerous.
That's
So,
right.
so we're even.
You are really petty, Mr.
And he said, and poorly designed that only establishment and billionaire candidates are guaranteed to be on stage. Explain to us why that system hurts people.
Well, I ran for governor of California. I got 3.5 million votes. It seemed to me that made me credible. The RNC is requiring us to have 1% or 40,000 individual donors. In 2020, the DNC required you to have 1% or a certain number of donors. For reasons that I don't quite understand, the RNC is requiring you to have both of them. One of the candidates in this race is a multimillionaire. He's offered a $20 gift certificate if you give $1. Another one is offering a free, air quotes, country western concert if you give $1. Another one is giving you a commission if you are a prospective donor to go out and get other prospective donors. It seems to me that corrupts the whole process. I'm doing it the old-fashioned.
Okay, just for the record, the people that raise money for elections are given a percentage. So what he's referencing is Vivek Ramaswamy giving 10% back to people that help him raise money. This is what Larry Elder is attacking. And I just think that that is actually a very smart tactic to use because, again, those who raise money for the super PACs earn a percentage of it. Vivek is just doing away with the super PAC and just having a grassroots movement. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, for the record.
Way, Charlemagne, I'm asking people to support me and go to my website, larryelder.com, and give me at least $1. If I get $1 from 40,000 individuals, I will be up on that stage in Milwaukee on August 23. And when I get up there, game on, hold my beer.
So why is this system? Is this system holding you back?
Go ahead.
Would you say it's a system holding you back?
I would say it's unfair. It seems to me this early, the voters ought to decide this. I mean, in 2016, there were 17 or 18 Republican candidates. Now there's 13. Somehow, some way, our republic survived, and we could survive with 13 candidates. I don't know why they have all this rule to eliminate certain people at this point. But rather than
those systems can hold you back no matter how hard you work, right?
No, I'm going to say, but rather than whine about it, my goal is to get on as many shows as I can, like yours. Urge people to go to larryelder.com, give at least $1, even if you want somebody else. Don't you think it's wise for us to talk about the epidemic of fatherlessness, the lie that America remains systemically racist, and the need for school choice? 13 public high schools in Baltimore, 0% of the kids can do math at grade level. Are you kidding me? 53 public high schools in Chicago, 0% of the kids can do math at grade level. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party is opposed to school choice, while the party elites, whether it's Barack Obama or Gavin Newsom or Joe Biden, have their own kids in private school. It is wrong, and we need to talk about that.
Larry Elder, why would somebody from our community vote for you, or why should they vote for you? Why should a black person vote for you?
Because I'm telling the truth, and the truth oftentimes is unpleasant. It's not pleasant for me to be called the black face of white supremacy, as the LA Times did. It's not pleasant for me to be accused of being anti-black, as Tavis Smiley once called me, because I don't support reparations. By the way, Barack Obama never supported reparations. Nobody called him anti-black. We need to talk about what's going on. What's going on is the breakdown of the family. And most of the things we complain about downstream, whether it's crime or whether it's bad schools, the genesis is the breakdown of the nuclear intact family, and we don't talk enough about it.
Do you agree that our community is hit harder with a lot of things that you just said, whether it is racism, whether it is getting loans, whether it is getting entrepreneurship, whether it is education, whether it is all those things? You do understand that and agree with that, correct?
I do, but much of it is either self-inflicted or because of policies that we have supported, Democrats that we have supported. I wrote a book it's coming out in October. It's called As Goes California, My Mission to Rescue the Golden State and Save the Nation. It's about the one-party rule in California. California has supermajorities of Democrats in the Senate and in the House. And as a result, our schools are near the bottom. People are leaving California for the very first time. We have the highest state income tax in the country. The average price of a home in California costs 175% above the national average, all because of these left-wing policies that are hurting the very people, black and brown people living in the inner city, that people on the left claim that they care about.
Before they ask the next stupid and inane question, we left California, we made the decision at the end of 2017, specifically because of these horrific policies that have been enacted that basically make homeless untouchables, that if somebody comes into your house, it's impossible to get them out, to evict them if they're not paying the rent, the squatter situation that I tried to state before, but rather inelegantly. There are all sorts of reasons that we left California, including, of course, the taxes, because I'd much rather that money go to pay for my family's education, for a vacation, rather than going to wasteful government programs. Let's see what Charlemagne's going to ask.
Pro-segregation was self-inflicted, or do you think,
slavery was self-inflicted? Of course, it wasn't self-inflicted, but there are a lot of people have bloody hands in slavery. Mm-hmm. For example, slavery could not have existed had it not been for African chieftains who were selling black slaves captured in battle or captured through raids and selling them to European and Arab slavers. It could not have existed without that. So everybody has dirty hands here. That's why reparations is such a foolish thing. If you're going to get reparations from the 5% or so of white people that have some sort of generational connection to slavery, and that's all there is, then you need to go back to Africa and get money from African countries that were involved in the slave trade and in the Arab slave trade. And by the way, the Arab slave trade was even worse than the European slave trade. 90% rate of attrition, often making men and women walk on barefoot across the Sahara, and the men were castrated. Only about 5.
So if they go after the money from the other countries, then would you agree that it would be okay to go after the money from America? Is that your problem with it?
When are you going to stop with this? Everybody has a grievance.
I just asked a simple question.
I'm answering your question. There's no end. There'll be no end to this because slavery has been part of human history from the very.
This bitch will not let Larry Elder answer the question. She's constantly jumping in, trying to reframe the question in such a way that she gets the answer that she wants, and she's not smart enough to do it at the outset. Larry Elder is so calm, so cool, and so collected, much more than I am watching this at home as I sit in his chair.
You're beginning.
Okay,
we're getting money.
I've let you talk. Sir, I've let you talk.
No,
and every
you
time
haven't.
I talk, you begin to talk, and then you say, let you finish. So I asked you a very simple question. You said, if you're going to go after it in America, go after it in Africa. So if we all agree to go after it in Africa, will you then agree to go after it in America? It's just a simple question. Yes or no?
No, I won't, because it's a waste of time. We ought to be spending our time on education.
Next question.
Okay. You told me that I cut you off. Then I tried to answer your question. You won't let me finish.
Go ahead, Larry.
Thank you. It's a waste of time. We ought to be talking about working hard, investing in ourselves. Right now, as we speak, there are Haitians in Haiti lining up for a lottery to come into this country. Why? Because it is the land of the free and the home of the brave. You can go from nothing to something faster in America than any other country in all of human history. We ought to be talking about that. Let me just, one more point. 1997, Time Magazine and CNN hooked up together to do a poll on what black teenagers and white teenagers felt about racism. Mm-hmm. And both of them were asked, is racism a major problem in America? Both of them said yes. But then Time and CNN asked this question of the black teenagers. Is racism a big problem, a small problem, or no problem in your own daily life? This is 1997. 89% of them said small problem or no problem in my own daily life. In fact, twice as many blacks said failure to take advantage of available opportunities is a bigger problem than racism.
That was 1997.
1997. Look it up.
It's 2023, though.
You think America's more racist now after the election and re-election of Barack Obama than it was in 1997?
Yes, because of the election of MAGA, Donald Trump.
Oh my God. I'm sorry. This guy does not deserve to have such a wide-reaching show. We elected Barack Obama 2 times, and you think that, so we elected Donald Trump and MAGA in 2016, and I guess that makes our country more racist than in 1960, in 1940? What is the logic there? That is just stupidity. Because we don't elect exactly who you want, that automatically makes America racist. The Breakfast Club should be smashed. Larry Elder smashes the Breakfast Club. These people are avatars for what is everything wrong with leftism, pretty much, other than the fact, to give them credit, that they bring on somebody from the right and are willing to engage slightly with him, although they're continually talking over him.
100%. Yes.
Really?
Absolutely.
Well, how is it, Charlemagne, that Donald Trump got 8% of the black vote in 2016? He got 12% in 2020, a 50% increase. He got 20% of the black male vote in 2020. If MAGA is racist, how do you explain that Donald Trump substantially increased the percentage of black votes the Republican Party got.
Sometimes people make
So
poor
why are you
choices.
running
Hold
against
on,
Trump then,
hold on,
Mr.
Ted.
Elder?
Yeah,
I'm not running against him. I'm running against Biden Harris. Any one of the Republican nominees we have would be better than what we have right now. I'm not running against him. I'm running to put forth the issues I just now mentioned that I've been talking about for the last few minutes.
I want to ask you about that. After 4 indictments, 91 criminal charges, don't you think it would behoove the Republican Party to move on from Donald Trump?
Oh boy.
I think that the voters in the primary will make that decision.
What do you think, though?
I have no problem with I thought Donald Trump did an extraordinary job as president, especially for black people. Best economy ever. He did something about the borders. The people that are most hurt because of porous borders are black people living in the inner city, because most of the illegal aliens have little or no education. They end up living in the inner city. They compete against black people with high school or less for jobs.
Mhm.
There are about 1 million fewer black people working than who would otherwise be working if it weren't for illegal alien labor. And illegal alien labor, according to a study done by the Civil Rights Commission, puts downward pressure to the tune of almost $2,000 per year on the salaries of black people living in the inner city. And Donald Trump gave us the most secure border we ever had. He also supported school choice. He also did the First Step Act, which allowed about 5,000 mostly black men with long criminal sentences, nonviolent, to have their sentences reduced an average of 70 months per. He pardoned Jack Johnson, the first black heavyweight champion. Even Barack Obama didn't do that.
Yeah,
He did an extraordinary job for black people.
I think you're innocent until proven guilty, but I feel like
Oh, no, because you already stated that Trump went to jail. So don't tell me that you think you're innocent until proven guilty, because you've already made it up in your mind that Trump is not only guilty, but has already been committed to jail. How did he end up in jail? You asked previously, Charlemagne.
had 4 indictments, 91 criminal charges. President Obama had 4 indictments, 91 criminal charges. Y'all would be telling them that they need to step aside and they shouldn't be running for president.
Well, I wouldn't vote for Barack Obama or for Joe Biden in any case, no matter whether he had indictments or no indictments. I don't vote for tax spend, regulate liberals.
You're a conservative, right? Obviously.
No question.
What initially made you gravitate towards being a conservative?
I think it was my father. My father was a lifelong Republican, and my father always told my brothers and me the following: Democrats want to give you something for nothing. When you try and get something for nothing, you almost always end up getting nothing for something. And my dad, I told you about his background. He told my brothers and me that hard work wins. You get out of life what you put into it. You cannot control the outcome, Larry, but you are 100% in control of the effort.
And who doesn't respond to such a rousing lesson? This is what I believe that all fathers should be teaching their sons. I think that America would prosper, that the individual would prosper, that each of these people's children, I hope they tell them exactly what Larry Elder's father told him, so that they too will prosper. Because everybody has that opportunity in America, and it is a choice whether or not you take it. And I advise everybody, work hard towards something. Work, because that's how you succeed.
Before you moan or groan about what somebody did or said to you, go to the nearest mirror, look at it, and ask yourself, what could I have done to change the outcome? And finally, Charlemagne, my dad told my brothers and me this: no matter how hard you work, how good you are, sooner or later, bad stuff is going to happen to you. How you deal with those bad things will tell your mother and me if we raised a man. I wrote a book about my father's life. It's called Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours. It's about an 8-hour conversation he and I had, where at the beginning of the conversation, I thought my dad was harsh. I thought he spanked us too often. We had a belt. In those days, from the South, you spank kids. And I thought my dad was way too harsh. And we had an 8-hour conversation. And by the time we ended, my dad got bigger and bigger and bigger, and Larry Elder got smaller and smaller and smaller, and I apologized to him. And it's a book that's changed a lot of people's lives. It's called, as I said, Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours. The paperback is called A Lot Like Me. Same book, but it's cheaper.
Can you honestly say this is the Republican Party that you grew up on? This modern day GOP?
Yes. The Republican Party pretty much has always stood for low taxes, low regulation, peace through strength, not strength through peace, and strong borders, and still does. And when Donald Trump is gone, and he will be gone, even if he gets reelected, the day after he gets reelected, he's a lame duck, the party will still go on. The principles will still go on. However, I do believe that many people in our party have spent and spent and spent, so that Ronald Reagan, my favorite president, when he entered the Oval Office, Charlemagne, when he left, government was bigger. It got bigger under George Herbert Walker Bush. It got bigger under W. It got bigger under Donald Trump. And the only way to restrain spending is with an amendment to the Constitution to fix spending to a certain percentage of the GDP, with exception for war and for natural disaster. Otherwise, we're going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Let me use the word unsustainable. That's the word Barack Obama used to describe the so-called entitlements. Unsustainable was a word that Bill Clinton used to describe them. But nothing happens because if you run claiming you're going to reform Social Security or Medicare, the other side is going to accuse you of not caring about the sick, the poor, the elderly, and you are going to lose elections. That's why government gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So we need a law to restrain spending. Otherwise, it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And for young people like you, these programs are not going to be there.
Mr. Elder, I know a lot of Black conservatives, and I completely agree about the Black family. I don't think anybody here objects to that.
Don't disagree about that at all.
I think when you talk about ideology and then you mix in parties and then personalities, it gets kind of confusing. And, you mentioned yourself not to moan and groan, that as long as you work hard, all is well. And I think where the conflict is coming in is you did moan and groan about how the Republicans treated you. You did moan and groan about Governor Newsom and, asking for a recall. You did not leave that up to the voters. You are moaning and groaning when it comes to Donald Trump and how he's being treated. So it just seems to be a hypocrisy. And I don't know if the message would land a little bit better if there was some fairness across the board on Democrats and Republicans. I'm an independent, by the way, and I think both parties are trash. And I think all of us here, see both sides. And that's the part that's just not landing for me. There seems to be an unfairness on both sides with you.
Well, not too surprisingly, I don't agree with your analysis. How is it that I did not leave the recall to the voters? What do you mean by that?
What do you?
You said I didn't leave the recall to the voters.
No. I said you moaned and groaned about it. You said it should be recalled, correct?
Oh my!
Correct.
I said Gavin Newsom should have been recalled. Yes.
Right. That's moaning and groaning.
Well, actually, it's taking advantage of what's in the California Constitution, which is when a certain percentage of voters sign a petition to recall a politician, there can be a recall vote, and there was one, as there was in 2003. We recalled the governor then, and there was in 2021 when I attempted to recall Gavin Newsom. That's part of our democratic process in California.
Absolutely. We agree with that. I'm going to your statement when you said rather than moan about it. A little while ago, you said rather than moan about it, I'm just going to keep doing the hard work. And so I'm just saying that technically is moaning about it because the governor's decided. That's my point, sir.
I don't follow exactly what you're saying. I really don't.
It's okay. I didn't expect you to.
It's okay because nobody else follows what this woman is stating. The fact is that Larry Elder did not necessarily moan and groan. He went and tried to recall Gavin Newsom. Unfortunately, he failed, and that hypocrite French laundry dining while everybody else is trapped inside is still in office. But Larry was not moaning and groaning about it, so she's presenting a completely false frame to our audience.
Yeah,
but
I'm a little slow sometimes.
One moment, yeah, we get it.
Yeah.
One moment you're complaining about the system, and the next minute you're saying the system is fair. The next minute you're saying it's not fair. So,
how many times has she said system during this episode of The Breakfast Club? How many times?
That's what I'm saying. There just seems to be a double standard on you and the system, not wanting to be accountable for a system that Black people are not in charge of, by the way, of not wanting to hold both sides accountable when it comes to the system.
Do I believe Hillary was treated differently and Joe Biden treated differently than Donald Trump is being treated? Yes, I do. Is that an indictment about whether or not America is systemically racist? No, it is not. Those are
they're two totally different things.
Yes,
you're trying to merge the two, but they're two totally different things.
I agree with you. They're two different things. No, we're agreeing. We're agreeing. They're two different things. We're agreeing.
No, they're two things. Not agreeing. Racism because we're not in charge of the system, sir. In case you
okay, all right.
Black people have never been in charge of any system.
Well, actually, we have been. Take Baltimore.
No, we've never been in charge of.
We've never been in charge of no system. How many times are we going to say system, sister?
Finish.
Tell me, what financial system are Black people in charge of?
What financial system? What, she's going to turn it to a financial system? Isn't she just asking what system? And then Larry's about to say Baltimore. And now she's saying, what financial system we haven't been in charge of?
Are Black people in charge of? What government system are Black people in charge of?
I'm about ready to tell you.
What prison system are Black people in charge?
I'm about ready to tell you.
I'm not talking about mayors. I already know that talking point, sir. I go on Fox News all the time as well. So let's not go there with that. I said, what system have we created?
Goodness.
Have we implemented that we have been in charge of? Name one.
Is this why you don't like talking to Black women, Larry Elder?
Wow.
What, is that some sort of defense? You don't like talking to Black women, Larry Elder, or whatever he said? What he's recognizing that his colleague is completely unhinged with how many times she said the word system. And then he kind of parries the blow for her that is about to come. Larry is a saint.
Baltimore. Freddie Gray a few years ago.
That's mayors. I'm not talking, I said system.
I'm
Remember,
going to
like
tell
the
you
word
about
system.
the system if you allow me to finish my point.
I'm not talking about somebody elected and doing a job, sir. I asked, what system did we create? What financial
Okay, let's
system
talk
did we
about the
create?
system of one of the largest.
What she's changing again, the goalpost that she's trying to get Larry to jump through. So he's about to tell her about the system of Baltimore that is fully contained and run by black people. And now she's again changing the goalpost. This is a common diversionary tactic in a debate, but it doesn't work if you can catch it. And you guys are smart enough to catch it, right?
Let him say his point.
Thank you.
Sir.
One of the systems of one of the largest cities in America, Baltimore. Freddie Gray died in police custody a few years ago. The mayor was black. The head of the police department was black. Number two,
It's not in charge of the system.
The
But go
system.
ahead.
Number two person.
What are you talking about? It is a fully contained black system. That's what it is. But that's not the system. Yes, because you have a hermetically sealed almost system of governance in Baltimore that was fully black. So if you want to talk about a system that y'all in charge of, it is Baltimore.
Person in charge of the police department was black. All
Still
of,
not in charge of the
all of
system.
city council, Democrats, majority black.
Still not in charge of the system.
Wow.
The system. Still not in charge of the system. As I said, the way that you can obviously tell who the stupid person is in a conversation is the one that says the same word over and over and over again and thinks that it makes them smart.
That's a position.
6 officers charged, 3 of them were black. A judge before whom 2 of the officers tried their case found him not guilty was black.
Still not in charge of the system.
The city.
What the hell? What the hell does this woman want? How many times is she going to say system, system, system?
Intendant of public schools was black. The county superintendent of public schools is black. The attorney general at the time, Loretta Lynch, is black, as was the president of the United States was black. And yet,
Still not in charge of the system.
who's in
I
charge of
asked
the
you a
system?
What the hell does she want? What system are you talking about? As I said, you have a hermetically sealed black system in Baltimore, but it's still not going to satiate her desire for a system. Do you want to move the proceedings to Ghana and talk about a 100% black country that I have visited? And by the way, I found the people to be very nice there in general. Do you want everybody to move over to Ghana and then to talk about the black system? Sister?
Well, Wanda Sykes said when Barack Obama got elected, how are you going to complain about the man when you are the man? Now, from the president to the attorney general to the state attorney to the mayor to the head of the police department to the commissions of the schools in the city and in the county to the majority of city council in that city, all of them are black. And you're still saying that we don't run anything?
So who's in charge of the
No,
system?
no. I said who created the system. I didn't say we didn't run anything.
Oh, now you
I
wanted
challenged
to-
a lot of those black leaders.
So now you want to run it to change it to who created the system? So the Greeks created democracy. And so thus, according to her logic, the Greeks are still in charge of all democracies on the planet. By the way, since then, the Greeks have been seriously resting on their laurels. But regardless, she wants to change the goalpost again. No, you never asked about who created the system. You asked who's in charge of the system. Now he's showing you once again who's in charge of the system, and you're trying to change it. The stupidest person ever.
By the way, I said who, when we talk about the system, what black people have been in charge of any system. I'm not talking about a position. I'm not talking about a mayor. You know good
Oh, so
and well what I'm talking
you're
about,
basically
Mr.
saying that they're black.
Okay, sorry to interrupt again, but you have Barack Obama in charge of 1/3 of the federal government, the entire system of the executive branch run by Barack Obama with Eric Holder, the black attorney general, and Joe Biden. If you ain't black, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. So I guess Joe Biden is an honorary black person, according to that logic. Goodness.
Faces that are still in those
Correct.
positions, but they're still being a
Correct.
part
Similar
of the
to you, Mr.
So-
Elder.
so-
You're
so-
a black face in a position in the conservative movement. They're just the same. They're just on the other side. I'm talking about
So then,
we have
so
never
then, so
been in
then, so
charge
then,
of
when
the
Martin Luther
system.
King said in 1966, "I believe there could be a black president in about 40 years' time," then it really doesn't matter if there's one or isn't.
No,
It's one because nothing changes. He was
Well, the
naive. He
system
was
also
naive then.
killed him as well. Well, we know that the FBI and the CIA also killed him. That system. You realize that, correct?
Wow. You say create.
An individual killed him.
Right. That was also a part of Pro Hotel through the system.
COINTELPRO.
Correct.
The system.
Not correct.
COINTELPRO.
Not correct. He was
So
killed.
the FBI didn't have anything to do with it. The CIA didn't have anything to do with
J.
it.
Edgar Hoover was definitely on Martin's ass. Like, come on.
I didn't say he wasn't.
Oh.
Robert Kennedy is the one that approved the wiretaps. But to say that the FBI killed him, I mean, what's your evidence of that?
No,
That's a pretty serious
I see what you're
charge.
saying. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Pretty serious charge.
Yeah.
Serious charges
Yeah, I
require
was talking
serious
about the
evidence.
Yeah,
What is your
Mr. Elder,
enforcement
you
law?
She was about to say, I'm talking about the system. It's like Allen Iverson saying, we're talking about practice.
I mean, listen, we talking about practice.
Man, we talking about practice when he didn't show up for one.
We talking about practice.
We talking about the system.
It is to allow states to set up commissions of retired judges and retired DAs to get rid of these soft on crime, George Soros-backed DAs that are allowing a bunch of bad people on the streets or not charging bad people to the full extent of the law. And the people that, by and large, that are hurt by these people are the very black and brown people living in the inner city.
Mm.
There's a Larry Krasner is a George Soros-backed DA in Philadelphia. He's been impeached, but this Philadelphia State Senate wouldn't even take up the case. We've had 2 attempts to repeal a soft on crime DA in LA County, and it hasn't gone through yet. We've got a bunch of, in my opinion, this guy, Alvin Bragg, he ran promising to get Donald Trump. And when he got in, he said the evidence wasn't there. And then one of the former DAs writes a book, accuses Bragg of giving Donald Trump a pass. And all of a sudden, he brings counts against Donald Trump. I think it's unfair.
You think members of your party are leaning toward fascism?
Define fascism.
Authoritarianism?
Define fascism.
I mean, the rejection of democracy, the rule of law, and equal rights under the law in favor.
Fascism, my friends, is the merger of corporation and state to achieve what neither could do on their own. That is what happened in Italy under Benito Mussolini, where it was originally coined.
Of a strong man, Donald Trump, who interprets the popular will?
No, I don't. There was a long article about Barack Obama by one of my mentors. His name is Thomas Sowell. He's an economist, he's a black conservative, still alive, around 95 years old. And he wrote a piece in which he said a lot of people call people like Barack Obama socialist. Socialism is government ownership of the means of production.
Mm-hmm.
Fascism is when the government allows you to own means of production, the government tells you what to do. And he said, frankly, technically, people like Barack Obama are fascists. That is to say, these are left-wing people telling you how to run your business, telling you what to sell, telling you what you can't sell. For example, in California, we have a governor named Gavin Newsom who recently said by the year 2035, no more sale of new gas-powered cars. How dare you? Most people don't want an EV. They like their own gasoline-powered cars, but now you're telling car dealerships they can't even sell them? What do you call that?
But what about, when you tell women what to do with their bodies?
Well, that is a moral issue. I happen to be pro-life, and I believe that that abortion is a sin. That's not telling women what to do with their body. That's expressing my opinion about whether or not it is right or it is wrong. For example, there is a guy right now behind bars in Philadelphia named Dr. Kermit Gosnell. Mm-hmm. He is an abortion doctor who performed late-term abortions. When I ask people who consider my position to be extreme, I ask them, tell me at what point do you believe pregnancy has gone so far that to terminate the unborn would be homicide? And almost nobody will give you an answer. So in other words, what you're really telling me then is this guy, Dr. Kermit Gosnell, should be set free. He's a political prisoner. He was persecuted unfairly. If you won't tell me when you think at what point a pregnancy cannot be terminated unless it's homicide, then to me you're essentially allowing women to kill the unborn, no matter how old that unborn is. And I think that's wrong. The other thing, Charlemagne, real quickly on this issue. It'd be one thing if the pro-life community was not talking the talk and walking the walk. But there are literally thousands of pregnancy centers all over America, whether it's funding for adoption services, funding for housing, funding for education, funding for job training, to let women know they have alternatives. And every state will decide this. The government shouldn't be passing some sort of law one way or the other regarding abortion. Every state's going to decide that. I'm in California, which is a deep blue state. There have been 2 initiatives to restrict abortion. I voted in favor of them. I was overwhelmingly defeated. And when abortion has been put on the ballot in recent years, the people that wanted abortion restrictions have lost. Mm-hmm. The American people pretty much have said, first-term abortions, they want them to be legal. Late-term abortions, they don't want them to be legal. I happen to disagree with that, but I'm willing to live in a society that has a different point of view than I have on this issue.
Can you have a real democracy if you're taking away people's power of choice? If you're taking away people's power to choose and not giving them any
It depends on what, Charlemagne. It depends on whether or not that includes murder, which many people think that late-term abortion is. Some people think that early-term abortion is. Frankly, I'm against all abortions, but I completely agree that it should be localized to the states rather than an overarching federal mandate that abortion be legal up until 9 months of pregnancy, which is what some Democrats definitely want. And it's not about taking away the rights. What about the rights to bear arms that the Democrats want to take away? Can we be a free democratic society when you're taking away people's rights or the right to choose not to be injected with an experimental vaccine that doesn't even freaking work? We find out after the fact.
Well, if you consider it to be
democracy?
a crime, that abortion is a sin, in my opinion, you're not taking people's right to choose. You're making a moral statement about what's right and what's wrong.
There's a lot of sins, though. Sex before marriage is a sin. I'm sure you did some of that.
As for the sins of my past, either the Lord has forgiven me or the statute of
Well, they'll
limitations
forgive-
have
they'll
run,
forgive-
have
they'll
run out.
forgive-
I'm making a
They'll
joke
forgive
about
your
that.
sisters, too.
A lot of people, of course, make mistakes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think that people should deal with the consequences of their actions. And if you let people know there are consequences to their actions, it will inform their actions and make them behave more responsibly. Anytime you allow bad behavior to continue, you're going to get more bad behavior, whether that's
So how does that apply to President Trump then? Because you said that was a two-tier system that.
because
There
I
she
don't.
goes with the
I
system
don't-
again.
I don't believe that Donald Trump.
You don't think he did anything?
I don't think he did anything wrong. No, I don't. I believe that he complained about the election the same way Hillary did. Hillary, for 4 years, referred to the 2016 election as having been stolen. Her word, not mine. She called Donald Trump illegitimate. Her word, not mine. Jay Johnson, who's Obama's DHS secretary, testified under oath that not a single vote tally was changed by the Russians. They tried, but they failed to change a single vote tally. 66% of Democrats believe the Russians changed vote tallies to get Donald Trump elected, even though Jay Johnson testified under oath, not a single one was changed. That's the damage that people like Hillary and former President Jimmy Carter and Stacey Abrams and Hakeem Jeffries and others have said for years, referring to Donald Trump as illegitimate. A greater percentage of Democrats believe 2016 was stolen than we feel that way about 2020, but yet nobody calls them election deniers and nobody accuses them of undermining our republic. And they're not undermining our republic. They're complaining about an election. You have a right to do so.
I know you probably got to go. Have you ever heard of the term nigga wake up call?
No.
Incident where a person of color forgets that they are of color and are reminded rather brutally by an unexpected act of racism. Have you ever had any of those?
brother.
I'm just asking. You think you've ever
Well,
had
I'm acutely aware, Charlemagne, that I'm a black person, just as you are a black person. And when Joe Biden insulted you by saying, you ain't really black, we don't know whether or not you want to vote for me or vote for Donald Trump, it seems to me that should have been a wake-up call on your part. How dare this guy come in here and insult you, a black man, and tell you you got to think a certain kind of way? I'm amazed that you weren't mad about that.
I'm not gonna say it upset me, just like I'm not letting you upset me. You know what I mean? I don't tend to get upset over things like that. But what I did say,
well, you just not
it's
talk about a nigger wake-up call, and it seemed to me that should have been a wake-up call on your part to have a white guy come in here who also said, by the way, about Mitt Romney. Because he didn't want to put more regulations on Wall Street, going to put y'all back in chains. And Joe Biden has lied for decades about his civil rights record, claiming that he desegregated movie theaters and restaurants in Wilmington, Delaware, when he didn't do any of that. He lied and said that he tried to visit Nelson Mandela during apartheid South Africa. He did not. And he came in here and told you aren't even black and let you think a certain kind of way. It seemed to me that should have been a nigga wake-up call for you, but it wasn't, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, for the record, I'm not a Democrat or Republican.
I didn't say you were.
I think both.
I don't know what you are. I never even asked you about your party affiliation.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, but you are black. And to have a white guy come in here and tell you have to say think a certain kind of way, otherwise you, quote, ain't black. Wow.
How should I have replied to him, you think?
What I just now said, how dare you insult me and tell me I think as a human being, let alone as a black person? I don't tell you how to think, Joe Biden. How dare you come in here and tell me how I should think? I'm going to vote for Donald Trump if I want to vote for Donald Trump. And if I want to vote for Donald Trump, it does not make me not black. 20% of black people, black men, as I said, voted for Donald Trump in 2020. Are they not black now? So only 80% of black people, black men walking around are really black, 20% are not because they voted for Donald Trump. How insulting is that? How condescending is that?
I mean,
I believe it or not, I used to be black, and then I voted for Donald Trump. And look at my pasty ass now.
Probably right, but I didn't take it in that way.
Well, I did.
As I said to him in that moment, it's just about me wanting something for my people, and I want to know what is he going to do for my people, and not only for my people now. How are you going to atone for the things you've done to my people?
Right.
That's it.
Right. And this is a guy, Joe Biden, who, when he first got into the Senate, hung out with segregationists, talked about how well he got along with them, talked about how he didn't want integration because of a jungle. This guy has made all sorts of insulting things to black people, and his policies right now are hurting black people. Inflation hurts the people at the bottom more than anything else. Letting a bunch of illegal aliens into the border are hurting black people more than anybody else, as I said earlier. He's opposed to school choice when he has his own kids in private school, and we lost a year, almost 2 years of in-school education in California because of COVID that he supported. I mean, this guy has done monstrous things to black people, and then for him to come in here and tell you how you ought to think as a black person, that blew my mind.
As a person objectively who doesn't care about either party, when I just take a step back and I just look at everything that's happening, I see one party that seems still committed to democracy somewhat, and one party who's headed fast towards fascism.
I'm 100% sure that he means the Democrats that are headed towards fascism, that demand that you get a vaccine mandate, that coerce social media companies to obliterate the First Amendment rights of various U.S. citizens, that hide the Hunter Biden laptop story. Those are the people that are bringing us towards fascism, that are uniting corporation and the state. I'm assuming that's what he means, right?
Just my personal opinion. Who do you think I would vote for?
Well, let's talk about fascism, since I assume you're talking about election denying. In 2000, when George W. Bush won the election over Al Gore, the Democrats, the first week of January 2001, tried to overturn the results in Florida. 2004, George W. Bush gets reelected. Democrats, including Benny Thompson, the chair of the January 6th Committee, Jamie Raskin, a member of the January 6th Committee, joined with 28 other House Democrats and Senator Barbara Boxer to overturn the results in Ohio, claiming without any evidence that the Debo voting machine had been hacked. 2016, January 2017, Democrats challenged more states trying to get the election overturned that elected Donald Trump. Then Donald Trump challenged the first week of January in 2021. Nobody accused them of undermining our republic. Nobody accused them of being fascists. They exercised whatever means they could to try to win the election. I want to remind you that Hillary Clinton advised Joe Biden during the 2020 election, if it is a close election, quote, do not concede under any circumstances, close quote. Donald Trump used whatever legal means he could, advancing some novel legal theories to try to stay in office, and he failed. But I don't blame him for trying.
Yeah, but it's not just election denying. It's the disdain of women and fear of non-standard gender identities and sexual orientation.
Disdain
it's
for
the
women.
Galvanizing of popular rage against cultural elites. It's nationalism based on dominance.
All this guy's doing is repeating Democrat talking points. If you want to talk about disdain for women, how about letting transgender men, women, whatever you want to call them, into women's locker rooms and watch young women change with your hard dick out? That is disrespecting women. That is hatred for women. To allow men to take away women's scholarships for athletics, that is disdain for women. They're destroying women. They want a complete breakdown of the separation of the sexes.
Superior race and historic bloodlines. Like, there's a lot of things that Republicans are doing.
Well, what about Joe Biden going to Howard University, as he did recently, giving a commencement speech, Charlemagne, and he said the number one threat to the homeland was white supremacy. Really? The
FBI said that.
The Anti-Defamation League keeps track of how many people are killed by extremists, no matter the race of the extremists, every year. Last year, there were 25. As I said, in 2020, there were 11,000 blacks who were murdered, almost all murdered by other people, not murdered by white extremists. It's a lie to say white extremists is a big problem in America. It's a lie. It's what Democrats do to get black people angry.
The FBI said that.
It's what Democrats.
No, I got that from the FBI.
Fine. I don't agree with that. The number one threat to the homeland is a large number of people who are engaging in criminal activity. And what Democrats do is tell black people racism, racism, racism. They trot out David Duke or some other facsimile every 4 years to tell black people, vote for us, because after all, we're the party of racial justice, social justice, and equity. And these dastardly people over there, these Republicans, are the party of Jim Crow and slavery, even though it was the Democratic Party that was the party of Jim Crow and slavery.
So why should black people rock with the GOP then? Like, what are the reasons?
Economics. I had Tavis Smiley and Cornel West on my radio show once, Charlemagne. And I told Tavis and Cornel West that under Ronald Reagan, black adult unemployment fell faster than white adult unemployment. Black Hispanic unemployment fell faster than did white unemployment. Black teenage unemployment fell faster than did white teenage unemployment. Black businesses were created at a rate faster. Their revenues grew at a rate faster. And they both told me that I was wrong and that they would have the data on my desk by Monday. That was 15 years ago. I know the mail is slow, but it seems to me they should have given it to me by now. Again, Donald Trump presided over the best economy ever for black people, lowest unemployment. And it seems to me the number one reason that most people vote is because of the economy. We have had 40-year historic high in inflation. We've had gas prices that are now about 40% more than what they were when Joe Biden came into office. And we have about 7 million illegal aliens in our country. And the bulk of the suffering because of these illegal aliens will be borne by Black people living in the inner city. So those are three reasons alone not to vote for the Democratic Party and to vote for the Republican Party. And by the way, I'm not voting for a fishing buddy. It's not because I like Trump or like him personally. I'm voting for policies. And I don't really care whether or not his personality offends people and he does bad tweets. Maybe it might be better for our society if he were more polite. I don't know. I don't care. I'm not voting for a fishing buddy. I'm voting for somebody to keep taxes low, keep regulations low, to secure the borders and keep us out of unnecessary wars.
Would it be fun to have money in a fascist country, though? To be Black and have money in a fascist country?
What?
Or to be anything other
Well,
than
I don't agree this is a fascist country. It's always better to have money than not to have money.
All right. Anything else, Tess?
Well, just a simple question.
Uh-oh.
Have the Republicans done anything that you disagree with? Just out of curiosity.
They spend too much. I think taxes are still too high. I think that there are a lot of Republicans that support things like minimum wages. And by the way, Milton Friedman, one of my favorite economists, said the minimum wage is perhaps the most anti-Black law in the statute books, close quote. At one time, a Black teenager was more likely to have a job than a white teenager until the minimum wage came along and kicked it up and up and up. So there are policies that the Republican Party supports, like minimum wage. Some of them do that I don't like. Also kinds of licensing, unnecessary licensing. I was at an Apple store a few years ago, and this Black woman waited on me, and she was very sharp technically. I'm not very technically sharp, and I was very impressed. And I said, "Have you always been technically sharp?" She goes, "Well, I'm not really. I'm just here because I want to earn enough money to get a license to cut hair." I said, "Black hair?" She said, "Yes." I said, "You don't know how to cut black hair already? I have Black barbers in my family. Everybody learned how to cut hair on their own." She said, "Well, in California, you have to have a license to get. You have to have a license to open up a shop to cut hair." I said, "How much does it cost?" She said, $5,000. I said, "You need to get a $5,000 license to learn how to do something you already know how to do? What is that?" So a lot of the rules and regulations. Okay, fair.
It's hard to get around them systems, no matter how hard you work.
But the system applies to both Blacks and whites too. But fair enough, those systems ought to be struck down. So there are lots of things.
I completely concur. It's overregulation, and what it is an impediment to competition. It is a moat around the business so that they can charge more, so that there is reduced competition. It is simply that. That's why incumbent businesses favor greater regulations, because it makes it much easier to drown the sunlight out, like the canopy of a rainforest, to the seedlings that are starting to germinate. And that is what regulations does. Regulations are anti-competitive, and they ruin future prosperity.
Republicans do that. I don't.
Well, it's not just cutting hair. You know that. You know they have to train how to learn with diseases and to make sure your clippers are clean and make sure certain things that you have to follow certain protocols so that you can be.
Yeah, it takes a lot to figure out how to clean your clippers, right?
A barber, so that you can make sure that the community is safe when you're doing these protocols.
Well, if there weren't government protocols, there'd be other protocols. For example, there's something called the Consumer Reports. That's not government, and it comes out and it talks about cars and what cars are good, cars are safe. If government didn't do these kinds of things, entrepreneurs would step in and they would have licensing. So there'd be a little sticker on the window when you go to a barbershop, and it would say, "I've been approved by so and so licensing board or organization."
Some of it's bullshit. 5,000 is too much, though. But
there are all sorts of things that we would do if the government was not doing them.
Do you have a Black barber?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, okay. Just making sure.
Actually, I have a Black barber for 25, 30 years. He got cancer, and now the person that owns the shop, who is Latina, cuts my hair.
Okay. I do want to ask you one final question. When do you think systemic racism ended? Since you said it don't exist anymore, when did it end?
I can't come up with a specific time, but Civil Rights Act.
Can we?
Civil Rights Act of 1964, Brown versus Board of Education, the Loving versus Virginia Act that struck down race mixing. You couldn't, for 13 states, you couldn't marry a white woman. Again, I think that when Barack Obama got elected, that was a big deal. When Obama got elected, this is really important. He got elected with a little more than 52% of the vote. He walks into the Oval Office the third week of January. He had a 70% approval. Now, how can that be? How can 15% all of a sudden support this man? It wasn't because they wanted capital gains taxes raised, which Obama promised to do. It wasn't because of Obamacare, which Obama promised to do. It's because many Americans said, at the very least, he'll stop the nonsense that America remains systemically racist. And for 8 years, in my humble opinion, he played race card after race card after race card. So when he entered the Oval Office, both blacks and whites thought race relations would get better. When he left, both blacks and whites thought they got worse. Why? Because he did things like the Cambridge police acted stupidly when they didn't. If I had a son, he looked like Trayvon. When what happened to Trayvon had nothing to do with his race. He embraced Black Lives Matter. He invited Al Sharpton in the White House over 70 times. He said that racism is in America's DNA. He said all sorts of things so that when he left, both blacks and whites thought race relations got worse.
Right, but sir, this is where and we can just agree to disagree because you're mixing race relations and voters, what voters decided to do, who might just be very good people that decided to elect a black man, confusing with.
That does not necessarily make them good people. It just voting for something black just makes somebody say that this is the best option. If I'm going to choose a basketball player and they're black, it just means that I think that they're going to help my team to the greatest extent. I just don't. Yeah, this woman is. Daddy wasn't around or something. I know I'm mind reading here. Obviously, I don't like her. Obviously, she's giving Larry Elder and Vivek Ramaswamy a horrible time, and she thinks that her IQ is far greater than the actual 84 that it is.
Institutional system racism, and those are just two totally different things. And it's okay if we disagree to disagree. I'm talking about structures, not what voters did, or voters wanted to see better race relations. We're talking about structures, the same structures that you referenced several times that have also spited you. So that's all
Joe Biden, for example, when Georgia reformed its law, said it was worse than Jim Crow. It's Jim Ego. More blacks voted in Georgia than ever before. The percentage of blacks increased. If the structure, how is it that the structure did not stop black people from voting in Georgia?
Well, I'm not talking about voting, sir. I'm talking about, and just to be fair, I think Joe Biden and what Joe Biden has did to African Americans, particularly with the war on drugs, was one of the worst things that actually happened to black people. Just to put that on the record, he too was a part of that system that I'm talking about. Democrats as well. I just try to stay balanced to say that same system it applies on both sides. Democrats and Republicans helped with mass incarceration. Joe Biden wrote it. So we have no problem. I have no problem condemning him as a Democrat for what he's done. I'm just talking about institutions versus relations are just two totally different things. And that's just where we, just disagree with that. And that's okay.
Well, we didn't really get into mass incarceration, but most people who are behind bars because they committed a violent crime against somebody else. And often the black people who are behind bars committed a violent crime against another black person.
Well, when I'm talking about mass incarceration, I'm not talking about violent crimes. I'm talking about nonviolent crimes, particularly the war on drugs. I was very clear in what I said.
I agree with you that I believe that the drug problem should be dealt with as a health problem rather than a criminal justice problem. But most people are not behind bars for using drugs or for dealing drugs. They're behind bars for having committed a violent act against another person.
Sure, but that wasn't what I was talking about. I was very clear when I talked about Joe Biden writing the crime bill and mass incarceration with war on drugs to nonviolent offenders. So that's a different conversation. You're weaving the two together. So we just have a disagreement on institutions versus race relations, and that's okay.
Well, in order for you to go to jail, you have to commit a crime. If you walk down the street,
not always when you're black in America.
Well, where are the class action lawsuits, Charlemagne? We have all these black lawyers. Many black people have gone to law school. Where are the class action lawsuits claiming that a bunch of people are behind bars illegally, wrongfully? Where are they?
So you think everybody that's behind bars?
I didn't say that.
Behind bars
I didn't say that. Why don't you answer my question? Where are the class action lawsuits?
Well, you got to need money to do class action lawsuits.
You've had a black attorney general, Eric Holder. You had back-to-back black attorneys general, Eric Holder and then Loretta Lynch. Why didn't they release a whole bunch of people who are illegally behind bars? Why didn't they do that? You had a black president.
And I criticized them as well, went on record, because actually you're right. He lied and said that he was going to fix the crack cocaine disparity. So I went on record. You're right. And guess what? Guess who he works for? The system. So he's just a black face that works for the system.
Who does he work for? The system. Everything wrong is the system.
At the time. So again, we just disagree on systems and institutions versus black faces in high places.
Well, the disparity has been rectified. Now you go to jail for dealing powder as you do for dealing crack. And at one time there was a disparity.
No, you go to jail, but the ratio is not the same.
Well, because the dealers are not the same. For example, there are more white people behind bars for drunk driving than there are black people. There are certain categories of crime that whites commit.
Mr. Elder, you're
depends on the drug. More whites are behind bars for meth than blacks are.
You're just going all over the place, sir. We were talking about, it's very clear.
You said drugs. It depends on the category of drug. It depends on the category of drugs. More whites are involved in meth than blacks.
I gave you the category that I wanted to talk about, and you start talking about.
I'm going to decide exactly what you're going to say, and you're going to say it. And that's the only way that I'm going to be happy and not say the word system 15,000 times in order to make myself seem smart, which I'm not.
Crack
You're just all over the
cocaine.
place, Mr. Elder, but it's okay.
More blacks are
Okay.
involved in crack cocaine. More whites are involved in powder. More whites are involved in meth than blacks. Depends on the category of the drug you're talking
Right,
about.
and I was talking about a very clear category, and I gave you, I told you where I just criticized the black man who was in charge, and you skipped over that and went right to talking about drunk driving.
Larry.
So again, sir, I have no problem with criticizing black Democrats. We do that. Charlemagne does that all the time. It's just the imbalance of understanding that even black faces in high places, even including yours and Democrats, Republicans, just being fair across the board. That's all.
Well,
if there is a contest for the world's stupidest person, I really hope that we can enter her as a contender for the United States so that we can win the gold.
To me, that to me basically is no different than what Joe Biden just did with Charlemagne, which is to tell me as a black person, I got to think a certain kind of way, otherwise I'm not black.
And I didn't like that either.
Well, you just did.
I didn't like that either.
You just did.
I
You
didn't
call
like
me a
that
black face as if I'm supposed to think a certain kind of way.
No,
You just
I said
did.
blackface. I said blackface in high places. I said they're everywhere. You're a blackface. You're in a high place. You're running for president of the United States. That's a high place. You are a
That's true.
blackface, correct? I said so. There's blackface in high places on both sides. So it's just about being fair for me on both sides. I've mentioned
I
three
agree.
or four Democrats.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
Yeah, I mentioned several Democrats that I have a problem with. Several, including Joe Biden. So you don't have to sell us on that. We get that. I'm just saying it also happens on the Republican side. That's all. And black conservatives agree with a lot of your messages, Mr. Elder. But when you're not balanced across the board, it just kind of lands flat. That's all.
Whose cocaine do you think it was in the White House? Since we're talking about drugs.
I have no idea. All I know is that it seems to me it's to be scary that that Secret Service has closed the investigation without identifying a suspect. What other kind of stuff goes in and out of the White House without anybody knowing about it? But I have no idea. I just think it's bizarre that the investigation all of a sudden got closed that fast.
And you think criminal charges should be brought against President Biden, right?
I think there certainly should be an investigation about the pay-for-play stuff that we're hearing. The IRS whistleblowers are saying that they were told to stand down in their investigation. I think there's a double standard going on, as I said earlier. For example, Donald Trump has been indicted for document possession. There is a special counsel investigating Joe Biden for document possession, but his defenders are saying, well, Joe Biden, unlike Donald Trump, turned over the documents readily when they were found out to have them. And if that's the case, why is the investigation still taking so long?
Tell them how they can support your campaign.
LarryElder.com. I need $1 from 40,000 individuals, even if you want somebody else to talk about some of the issues that Charlemagne and I have been talking about for the last several minutes. I can get them front and center. So LarryElder.com, $1, 40,000 individuals. I will see you on August 23rd in Milwaukee.
All right, this is Larry Elder.
Well, guys, there you had it. It was a very frustrating interview for me to watch. As you can tell by my reaction, I thought that Larry Elder is an absolute saint, and it is something that I personally lack. I do not have the equanimity not to react to the stupidity exhibited by the Breakfast Club, and Larry absolutely smashed them in the calmest way possible. The man's a saint. He obviously knows how to do an interview. Leave me your thoughts in the comment section below, and peace out. Have a fantastic day.